December the 4th be with you. I'm Matt with State of Flex, here to give you yet another one of my reviews for the Star Wars saga. This is an analysis of the first film of the Disney franchise of Star Wars films. This one's going to have a couple hot takes, but I think every opinion for every Disney Star Wars movie that's been released is going to be a hot take from any person who sees any one of those movies. So I thought we're going to switch up the format a little bit this time. I'm going to start by reading you a review of the film that I wrote a mere hours after seeing this movie upon its original release. I saw the Thursday showing back in 2015, December 14th, I believe. This was written that night, hours after finishing the film, and printed the following morning at 7 a.m. So here it is, folks. I'm going to start my review by reading my immediate thoughts of the film. Star Wars, Episode 7, The Force Awakens. 2 out of 4 stars. Set 30 years after the events of the previous chronological installment, The Force Awakens finds a batch of young blood to take on the First Order that rose from the dregs of the fallen Empire. Along the way, this scrappy set of new characters fall in league with old heroes, long believed mere myth, to take down a planet-destroying galactic menace. If this sounds familiar, it should. You have already seen this movie, but we'll get to that later. Make no mistake, this is Star Wars, as it should be. Exciting, fun, and featuring expertly crafted special effects. As a lifelong fan of the series, the moment the opening scroll hit and John Williams' music blared, the movie had taken an emotional hold on me. The scenes that followed offer much of what every original trilogy fan wants. Practical effects set on live location shooting with dashes of humor sprinkled over archetypal heroes and villains. But the film simply goes through the motions until the arrival of Han Solo, played by Harrison Ford. Once he turns up, the movie gels. Screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan, writer of The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, knows how to write Solo better than anyone, and Solo's moments shine in this picture. The trio of new heroes are compelling. Daisy Ridley shows her budding star power in her excellent portrayal of Rey, the trilogy's new lead. That is not to sell John Boyega and Oscar Isaac short. They both bring it and offer much of the film's humor. Adam Driver also gives a solid performance as the film's villain. He takes an easily one-note character and offers some texture. Truly, there is not much wrong with the movie. If one were to watch each scene on its own, what shows is strong filmmaking, solid performances, and old-school fun. But, viewed as a whole, the film is a carbon copy of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope. Seriously, every single scene from the original Star Wars film is represented. Want a scene where a little cute droid unit gets plans that the Empire First Order want to acquire? You got it. Nice desert setting with an orphan imbued with the Force? Got that too. How about a wise mentor who lived through the previous war, or sand smugglers trying to steal the cute droid, or a cantina scene, or a person carrying the plans being captured by the bad guys and needing to be rescued, but not before setting up the scenario wherein the good guys can escape and destroy the Death Star, or in this film, Starkiller Base. Or how about familial ties between the heroes and villain, or confrontation between the wise mentor and the film's big bad? It's all here. When one really sits down to assess the movie in the context of the franchise, The Force Awakens hasn't a single ounce of originality or uniqueness. It is a direct rehash of Hope, with some plot devices borrowed from Empire, made complete with a rehashed dialogue from Revenge of the Sith. There is still good in him. Words cannot express my profound disappointment that this was nothing more than a best-of clip show of the franchise. For everything in this movie to be so good, it has no business being so bad, so tired. Are people so blinded by prequel hate not to see this is a retread of everything that came before? I mean, seriously, what did this movie accomplish? When Jedi ended, the Empire had been defeated. The Jedi had arisen, and the rise of a new republic was promised. With this film's start, it is as if that movie didn't even happen. The Empire got a mere name change. All the Jedi are extinct except for Luke, once again, and the Republic is all but mentioned once. This film took a step backwards. Why? Also, why is it called The Force Awakens? Still not so clear on that. At the end of the day, J.J. Abrams made an excellent Star Wars fan film that featured the original cast. There are many moments of greatness, most of which you've seen before, and some really fun Easter eggs for fans of the original trilogy. But JJ, sir, come on. The big criticism of Star Trek Into Darkness was that it was a tired retread of The Wrath of Khan. Why do the same thing here? One would hope that with Star Wars Episode 8 in the hands of a whole new creative team, we will get a sequel that we deserve. One with the same aesthetic appeal and care for its characters that this film offers, but without retreading what we have already seen. Okay. I hope it wasn't too boring watching me read. But coming back to that review 6 years later, I stand by it. Almost every single word. There's a take or two I have against this now. I feel like in praising Harrison Ford's Han Solo performance, I've kind of walked back on that a tiny bit. Not that his performance was bad. He brought as much energy as Harrison Ford can bring these days to the performance. But I feel like even his character was walked back. His characters remained stagnant from the end of The Empire Strikes Back. He had no further character progression in Return of the Jedi, and he has no really further character progression in here that he didn't already attain in the first two Star Wars movies he appeared in. So I at once praised his appearance in the film, and well, his scenes are quite enjoyable because you like Harrison Ford and you like Han Solo. He doesn't really feel like an organic Han Solo to some extent. If there was a good reason for why he kind of is walked back, I would have been fine with it, but it just doesn't really seem to be there, at least organically in the screenplay. I do think I stand by my criticisms of Adam Driver's character in this film. The idea of doing just a copycat of Darth Vader was kind of brilliant, but also pretty tired, because like it's on the nose that this film and what Star Wars needed was a villain that could match wits with Darth Vader in terms of like his character appeal, his presence, and the menace that he brought to those original trilogy of films. So rather than try to develop a new one, let's just have a new character be the copycat of that character, and you can kind of get away with it. And the film does kind of get away with it, mostly because Adam Driver is a particularly gifted actor and sells the turmoil within him. I do think the opening scene of this film is the strongest part of the movie. It's the most distant from the original Star Wars film, though it is kind of similar at the end of the day. But I like what that scene tells us. I like Max von Sydow's character. It gives us a larger picture of a world that we didn't know, and that's something that excited me when I was in the theater on that opening night. Listening to this old man who's like, "This will begin to make things right," and then he has a much deeper voice than that. "This will begin to make things right." It's probably a little more accurate. But that whole scene and his interaction with Poe being like the punk, scruffy rebel in this film, standing up to Kylo, that whole scene is very well written, perfectly well executed, and has a strong little beat of action that follows. It's all good. The little droid is really cute. I didn't mention BB-8, but how they got that character to feel real and lived in, and be present there for filming was really, really impressive to me. Though it's also not lost on me that they had created this new character to be the new R2-D2 and had no idea to do with the existing R2-D2, so they just dropped him out of the movie essentially until he needed to show up at the end, which I think is an unjustifiable use of the character of R2-D2, who's been so pivotal in the previous 6 films on some level, and also the fact that the droids, both of them, in their original incarnation, were designed to be the narrators of this story, and that was like George Lucas' whole idea is they're the narrators of everything that's going on beforehand, so much so that I think he retconned the idea that this is all the story of from the Journal of the Wills told by R2-D2, and that's what those opening scrolls are. Unmentioned is John Williams' music in this film is extraordinarily good. I think after his work on The Prisoner of Azkaban, Williams got a little stagnant for a little while, where he didn't really deliver a truly great score. I liked what he did with The Terminal, but like most of his scores after Prisoner of Azkaban were just kind of like mellow and not really too strong. This is an incredible score. This is one of the best Star Wars scores, period. So there is that. In talking about theme, I think, again, going back to the opening scene, it tries to carry on the theme very well from the original trilogy of the idea of redemption. And it does this with the character of Finn. And Finn, in his original incarnation at the beginning of this film, from his opening couple of scenes, his opening half hour, is extraordinarily good. I liked the idea of redemption through him. At the end of Return of the Jedi, you find that redemption can actually be found within even the darkest of people, such as Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader. This movie, if you were watching them chronologically, the very next scene after the redemption and celebration of the return of Anakin, at the very end moment of Return of the Jedi, you slam cut into this movie, picking up 30 years later, and watch that a stormtrooper reforms, or First Order trooper, or whatever they're called in this, reforms, and discovers that he has been brainwashed or whatever. Continuing on with this idea of redemption. However, that's dropped pretty immediately when he then starts killing all these people that now the film actively acknowledges are people that are just kidnapped from birth and brainwashed into servitude. He blithely kills these people that he knows are like him, and no longer carries that idea of redemption even for these characters. It's really a perplexing move and never addressed again. It's touched on for a microsecond in Rise of Skywalker, but we'll talk about that when we get to Rise of Skywalker. There's more thoughts that come along with that. So I like the idea of Finn, but Finn is essentially just a retread of Han Solo. He's a man on the run, running from his past. So much so that even in the now not canon books, where Han Solo started out as a stormtrooper and then became the smuggler that we know, or in the existing canon, seen in the movie Solo, where he starts out as a stormtrooper and then becomes the smuggler that we know, but always on the run from his past, they're the same character. That's kind of disappointing. And in fact, all three of the main characters are essentially just posits of the character that already existed in the original trilogy. You have Poe, who's the smart-mouthed one who stands up in the opening scene once he's been caught to the big bad Darth Vader stand-in, is directly mirrored in A New Hope with Princess Leia. He's the stand-in for Leia in this one. And is taken out of the picture for about the same amount of screen time that she is in that first picture. before coming together at the end. And getting involved, and she's the protege of Leia in the Resistance. Then you have Rey, who's just Luke with a gender swap. I don't stand by the assertion that she's a Mary Sue in any way. I think she is her own lived-in, realistic character, and every bit as active with the Force and given the strength and conveniences of screenplay that Luke is in that first movie, or even the first two movies. So I don't stand by that, especially this is a franchise with Anakin Skywalker, and is in his first movie in Phantom Menace, him with the pod race thing. How come nobody criticizes him? Because he's the chosen one. Well, why isn't she the chosen one? It's stupid. We just haven't heard the prophecy. So screw you. She's not a Mary Sue. She's a good character. That's just a rehash of Luke, who also is in fact a good character. The complete and utter fear of mishandling Luke, so just deciding to not include Luke in this film, is cowardly. And I think that J.J. Abrams has a bad habit of this. He had originally turned down the film. Many, many filmmakers did. J.J. turning down Force Awakens on his first go, saying he didn't want to touch that, because he didn't want to screw up the franchise. In a weird way, when he does touch it, he handled only the character that he was interested in, which was Han Solo. He largely wrote out the other two principal leads from the previous trilogy. Luke doesn't even get a line, and Leia has 2 glorified scenes, and that's about it. Unless you include some of the deleted scenes that didn't make it into the film. And that's kind of a disservice to her character as well. That's something that irked me when I first watched it. Just that you took Luke, who is such an active presence in the original movies, and then make him the MacGuffin of this movie. It was something I really didn't like. That said, when Luke finally shows up in this movie, it is a meaningful, powerful scene. Even for somebody who didn't respond well to this movie, I responded amazingly to that, until the camera starts rotating around him, Michael Bay style, for 45 seconds as she's holding out the lightsaber in an incredibly awkward position. That scene goes on for a minute, and there's no reason for it to, I sat there in the theater, opening night, just being cut, 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 cut. And it just never happened until finally, thank God, directed by J.J. Abrams, has appeared on the screen. His reverence, J.J.'s reverence for the original trilogy, the original film in particular, is kind of endearing, but it's also a disservice to movie making in general, and I think this is JJ's greatest flaw. He's made good movies. I've liked movies that he's made. I think the Mission Impossible 3 is a pretty solid movie. I think the first Star Trek is by and large a good movie. It's kind of bad Star Trek, but a great movie. And it's a movie that's character focused, and he nailed the characters. He made Kirk kind of a prototype Han Solo for that story, and it works when you apply that onto Kirk, because they are kind of both just gunslingers at the end of the day. But here, his fear of straying away from making a movie that fans might not respond well to, like happened with the prequels, he decided to make exclusively safe choices, and in making safe choices, he didn't make a single innovative choice. And Star Wars has always been about innovation. Nobody had seen special effects like that when they first saw the original Star Wars movie. Empire Strikes Back just doubled down on that and then gave you Muppet Yoda. Nobody had ever seen anything like that. The grand scale battle at the end of Return of the Jedi had never been done on that level before, and it's still to this day pretty darn impressive. The Phantom Menace gave you digital technology in a way that you'd never seen before, and the first truly digital character in Jar Jar Binks. He may have been irritating, but he is well executed. Plus that pod race scene is the fastest, race scene I think that I've ever seen, and it really works. Plus that lightsaber fight. Attack of the Clones continued on with the digital technology, and we wouldn't have movies made on a digital scale today. The MCU would not be here today if it weren't for films like Attack of the Clones, how he moved forward with the visual effects. And that is especially so with Revenge of the Sith, which also executed pretty strong drama. But the technological achievements of the prequel trilogy were there, and all of them gave us significantly interesting visuals. I've not been in love with the visual language of all of Lucas's films, but the visual imagery that you're shown is really impressive. This film doesn't have visual imagery that's anything unique to this film outside of the circular robot, but the circular robot was the original incarnation of R2-D2 when the first drawing boards came for the original Star Wars movie. He was designed as a ball. It just was unfilmable at the time. Well, now it's filmable, and they just recycled that idea. Even those concepts are recycled. The first images of Luke Skywalker from the original drafts of Star Wars, A New Hope, when Luke was originally a female, showed a female in a beige outfit with goggles on her head. That just was an Easter egg for us fans who grew up thinking, wow, there could have been a female Luke Skywalker that drove this story. Well, now there is. And so even the few minute ideas that show up in this movie are just rehashed from old Star Wars. Maybe they weren't things that made it to the screen, but they existed before, and a true fan would know that. So that's just something that is really disappointing. However, I said that I had a problem with the visual language of the Lucas films. I think the only one that is really, truly, genuinely visually intriguing in terms of its visual language was Empire Strikes Back and A New Hope to some extent. However, he shot Return of the Jedi and then the 3 prequel films pretty boringly outside of the space battles, which in the prequel films are few and far between. JJ brought one great thing to Star Wars, and that is a visual language that showed movement and a dynamic camera work that was not present in Star Wars before. You saw a little bit of that in the Clone Wars, but he brought it to the live-action Star Wars, and for that I do praise bringing JJ on board. I think JJ is a good producer, and he brings good ideas to the table, but he is so non-committal with anything for fear of offending anybody that he just relies on his little mystery boxes. This is something that also really irks me, and I will touch on this sort of in the next episodic review, but JJ relies on a format called the mystery box. That's because there's a TED Talks you can watch him talk about where when he was a kid, they sold this product called a mystery box, and for $10, and you wouldn't know what was inside until you opened it. And he bought that box, and he never opened it because he didn't. His mind's imagination of what was in there was far better than whatever could possibly actually be in there. So he's put those in every story he's told since then, and that there's merit to that, especially in television, with things like Lost, where you are doing it over time. He had no control over where Lost was going because they had no definitive endgame and they were kind of writing as they went. But then to implement that into features is kind of disappointing and disingenuous, especially with Star Wars. Giving us a movie with tons of questions. Who is Rey's parents? Where did the lightsaber come from? Why is it in Maz Kanata's little planet cantina thing? Who is Snoke? How did he rise? How does he know the Luke Skywalker from long ago? All these different things, like what happened with Kylo in his past to make him turn against the Jedi. Who are the Knights of Ren? Just building a whole screenplay around questions that will be answered in the future is really lazy unless you have those answers already. Like, it's one thing to sit there and, like, J.K. Rowling and write the Harry Potter franchise, write about the scar and the extreme presence of that, have Harry ask about the scar in book 1 when she had already written, supposedly, the last couple chapters of the very last book before she even finished writing the first book. She knew where the end was, and that wasn't the case for this film. He asked all these questions with no interest in ever answering, because he's like, it's not my job, I'm not writing the second one. So he just passed it along, like you do on TV. And that doesn't work when you do a movie, because the way the internet works, people are going to fan speculate to death, and no answer that you could ever give is going to be as satisfying as what you come up with, or once you've settled on an idea in your head of what that answer should be. When you're given something that might not match that, you're going to be incredibly divisive to that answer, and maybe be outright angry that you've wasted your time speculating for 2 years. This is something that would go on to happen, and that is all here. And he cites Empire Strikes Back as having this with the great Vader reveal, and he cites A New Hope with the fact that Luke and Vader, the family lineage there. But here's my counter argument to that. A New Hope rests on its own without any questions at the end of the day. There's story threads that can be picked up later, like Vader gets shot out of the Death Star battle, and you see his ship flying away, like, oh, where's he off to? That's a different question than who's the parents being asked in the film, and or like, where did you get this sword? And Maz Kanata being like, that's a great question for another time. Go. And then actively has the audience speculating about this. An answer we never got, by the way. So that's another problem with leaving these questions in places. But A New Hope functions on its own without any mystery boxes. You don't know that there's a mystery box in A New Hope until you're watching Empire Strikes Back and Vader says, "No, I am your father." That part there is where you're like, oh crap, there was a mystery box in the first one all along and we didn't know it. But that's because we didn't know it. And Empire Strikes Back functions the entire time with that reveal not mattering, but once that reveal happens, recontextualizes not only the whole movie you've just watched, but the previous movie, and all movies that would come before it. That's completely different than what they did with this. And I think that is the most disastrous thing that they did. They being Lawrence Kasdan and J.J. Abrams. It's cowardice and setting up failure. And this is something he should have learned from Lost or Fringe or any other number of things that he has touched. All of which are good shows, have great episodes, and some of them even have strong conclusions. But the biggest criticism of all of them is that they're these mystery boxes that some of them get unsolved, don't get resolved in positive ways, whatever. I'm on a tangent. I will stop tangent now. The last thing I want to address is the movie that we could have gotten. Michael Arndt, who wrote Toy Story 3, was the original one to write the screenplay for Star Wars Episode 7, based on George Lucas's original pitched draft of the treatment for Star Wars Episode 7, when Lucas sold his film to his film industry to Disney. He sold along with it 3 treatments for Episode 7, 8, and 9. Michael Arndt was hired to write Episode 7. He worked on that through 2 completed drafts that followed the character of Kira, who was a young Jedi, 14, who was under Luke's tutelage, and Luke was being haunted by the ghost of his father, who was flicking back and forth between the light side and dark side of the Force, kind of like a candle in the wind, constantly flitting from the Hayden that we know to the burnt Hayden from the end of Revenge of the Sith. Constantly in that state between light side and dark side, and would this rise up in the younger generation? This was some pretty compelling ideas. It took you under the sea. It took you to places we would eventually go in this trilogy, but they canned that in favor of making this safe movie because of essentially JJ's cowardice of giving fans something new isn't the right way to go. Giving fans something that they're familiar with is what they really want. And aesthetically, yeah, it is what we wanted. But it isn't, like, there's no original ideas in it. And that's something that George Lucas himself criticized this for when he made his famous, like, Disney's White Slavers interview, which I urge you to watch. It's pretty fascinating. Yeah, I really would kill or die to read that Michael Arndt screenplay. Like, they leaked the alternate episode 9 screenplay, which I've read and will cover at a later date. I would love to read the alternate draft for episode 7 to see the story we could have gotten, or even the treatments that George Lucas had originally pitched that Disney has no intention of playing with. However, I think that if Disney's smart and they own an animation department, why don't they just do animated versions of these and do like 90-minute or even 45-minute shorts of what these treatments could have or would have been? That could be kind of neat. But anyway, episode 7, I didn't really talk much about the characters because they're just simple rehashes. I love the scene between Leia and Han when they first meet again, and she's like, old jacket, and he's like, new jacket. That part's good. Harrison Ford, the energy he brings to the film is really good. On the date that it was announced that Disney was making a new Star Wars movie, I threw like excellent excitement at the news, and I was like, however, I'm calling it right now. Han Solo is going to be killed in this movie. I hope that they're not just making it as an excuse to kill off Harrison Ford in this. And sure enough, that is exactly what they did. And I'm fine with you killing characters. We'll discuss this at a later point too. But I feel like they should be earned. And his scene was 100% telegraphed. And I don't think he was an active participant in the scene where he got killed. The way Han Solo should have gone out is fighting. That is who that character is. The way he goes out is, as I say, it was just a retread of what happened in A New Hope, and that whole scene just kind of irked me. I did like Chewbacca's reaction and like immediately shooting what follows is really strong scene, but his death scene itself, I think they could have handled considerably better with a simple rewrite. So yeah. That's that. I loved the scene with the discovery of the Millennium Falcon and the gun not being able to move, and the like space battle on the sand of Jakku was all incredibly visually interesting. I loved that Rey's playing with Star Wars action figures. I thought that was really cute, and a nice like echo back to Luke playing with Star Wars action figures of his own in the very first movie. There's a lot to like, but I'm a person who's very focused on story and storytelling and the art of narrative, and this film is artless when it comes to that. So that's my thoughts at the end of the day. I stand by my original review by and large. I'll give it the 2 out of 4 stars still to this day. But yeah. So those are some of my hot takes of this film. Captain Phasma was one that was really interesting to me when it was originally announced, and I was disappointed with her usage. However, I still think she looks cool. She's kind of the Boba Fett of this franchise. I'm going to end with one last story. This movie has also significant meaning to me because when it was first announced that they were going to make it, I was excited and ecstatic like you would expect me to be. But I made a conscious decision that I didn't want to learn anything about the movie. I didn't want to know, I looked at who the cast was, but I didn't want to learn anything about characters or anything. So I went into this movie blind with no expectations outside of, like, watching the 2 trailers that they released. That was everything that I saw of the movie beforehand, with the sole exception of buying an Entertainment Weekly, where they wrote about all the like set visits and stuff like that. I read that, and the only real reason I read that was because at the time my wife was pregnant, and there was a harrowing night on the night before my daughter was born where my wife was starting to go into labor. She was beginning to get contractions, and I was supposed to be timing them, and I was doing that, but her timings were irregular or whatever, right? So we decided to go to bed because they weren't like within the time limits of, hey, we should go to the hospital. But the pain was so strong, my poor wife couldn't sleep, and I couldn't sleep because I was like timing and whatnot. And so all I had next to me was this Entertainment Weekly with the Star Wars set visits, which I hadn't planned on reading, but I was like, I'm gonna read this. So I have a very vivid image in my brain of that night sitting there reading about BB-8 and how this was the first female droid. Again, something else they walked back on, calling him a him in the movie, but I was like, remember reading that, looking up at my wife and being like, this is interesting, the new droid in Star Wars is going to be a female. And she was hugging the doorwell of my like walk-in bedroom closet, just hunched down in pain and being like, I absolutely don't care. And you could just tell that she was like, I'm going to light you on fire for talking about Star Wars during this instant. But that image is just like seared into my brain of my poor wife going into early stages of labor while I'm sitting there reading about Star Wars droids. So yeah, I still have that magazine for sentimental value because of that, not because of my affection for this movie. But even there, that's something that shows. They had an original idea, having a female droid, and they decided not to even commit to that and made BB a boy. Which is ludicrous. So yeah. Also, fun fact, Bill Hader does the voice of the for BB-8. Go Bill Hader. He's a pretty awesome rock star. This movie also has quite a few cameos that you don't know about, like Daniel Craig and Kevin Smith does a voice of one of the stormtroopers and various other people. So yeah. Star Wars Episode 7, I was profoundly disappointed, and we will discuss next month Rogue One, the first Star Wars theatrical spin-off, if you don't count the animated Star Wars Clone Wars. So until next time, thanks for watching. Hit the bell, like, subscribe, tell me if I'm just heinously wrong or heinously right in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Bye.